Prologue. Fitz chivalry reflects on his life, filled with purpose and painful memories. He writes to distract himself from the lingering effects of his addiction and the emotional scars of his past. His work includes history, magic, and translations, but often leads him to recollections of his former self, Fitz chivalry. He recalls being killed by Regal, starved, and beaten in a dungeon. Fitz chivalry reflects on lost years and the people who moved on without him. His body was eventually claimed by Lady Patience and buried, but later Burrich and Chade resurrected him, returning him to life, though Fitz chivalry remains uncertain about his resurrection. In Chapter 1, Fitz reflects on his life under Heart of the Pack in Chalked. He grapples with frustration, isolation, and unsettling dreams. Chade and Burrich visit, discussing the past and Verity's absence, while Fitz confronts his guilt over betraying King Shrewd. He reveals that his actions led to Shrewd's death, as Regal had already planned the king's demise. Fitz struggles with nightmares and fear, remembering his fractured identity. As Burrich and Fitz try to adapt to their new life, Fitz learns that returning to Buckkeep could lead to his death. Chade eventually visits, offering hope. In Chapter 2, Regal Farseer crowns himself king, causing unrest by neglecting the coastal duchies and withholding resources. Regal searches for Queen Ketrican and her missing child while consolidating power. Fitz reflects on his past, his fractured identity, and the political instability. Burrich and Chade discuss Fitz's impulsiveness and the consequences of his past actions, including an assassination. Fitz, angry and regretful, confronts Burrich, pushing him away. Burrich announces his departure, leaving Fitz to find his own path. Fitz struggles with his feelings for Molly and resolves to pursue his desire for vengeance against Regal. In Chapter 3, Fitz reflects on his past, grappling with guilt and the loss of his humanity. As he prepares for his journey to Tradeford to kill Regal, he gathers supplies, including herbs and poisons with Night Eyes. Fitz struggles with his identity, contemplating Verity's absence and the betrayal by his brother Regal. He recalls the failed rebellion and how Regal's coup led to King Shrewd's death. Fitz is left isolated, with Molly gone from his life. He briefly attempts to use his skill to check on her, but is too tired. The chapter ends with a wolf's mournful howl. In Chapter 4, Fitz wakes up with a hangover in a secluded hut and is briefly attacked by two Forged Ones. He continues his journey with Night Eyes toward the Buck River, observing the decline of the region due to raids and mismanagement. In a town, he meets a group of minstrels who inform him of increasing hardship, including famine, high taxes, and red ship raids, while noting that patrols are ineffective. Fitz learns that King Regal is seeking a pock-scarred man, possibly Chade. Later, he agrees to travel with the minstrels for protection from the Forged Ones. In Chapter 5, Fitz struggles with painful memories and his loyalty to Verity. During a red ship attack, he briefly links with a boy's consciousness, feeling his death and leaving Fitz drained. Traveling with Josh, Honey, and Piper, he remains distant and reflects on his lost relationships. After a dangerous encounter with Forged Ones, Fitz faces fear but fights to protect his companions. Though he defeats an enemy, Honey accuses him of cowardice. Fitz, feeling isolated and broken, contemplates the consequences of his actions and emotionally distances himself from his companions, overwhelmed by fear and weakness. In Chapter 6, Fitz leaves Crow's Neck, witnessing Black Rolf being beaten by guards. He helps Rolf, who, with his bear companion, takes Fitz to a secluded cabin where he learns about the Old Blood's bond with animals and the dangers of Regal's vendetta against those with the wit. Rolf offers to teach Fitz how to protect himself, but Fitz declines, feeling his mission is urgent. Rolf warns Fitz that he will eventually need their knowledge, and Holly offers help if needed. Fitz and Night Eyes continue their journey, knowing that Regal's influence grows stronger the farther they go. In Chapter 7, Lady Patience strengthens her power by organizing King Shrewd's former guard to rebuild villages and create a network of messengers, the Ivy Runners. Fitz and Night Eyes travel through the countryside, surviving on hunting and stolen food. Night Eyes decides to leave Fitz to join a wolf pack, and Fitz reflects on his feelings of loneliness and the possible loss of their bond. Fitz encounters a hawk carrying a message from Holly, warning him that King Regal is hunting Old Blood and suspects Fitz and Night Eyes. Fitz contemplates his next move, realizing it's time to rely on himself. In Chapter 8, the raiders target Byrne's duchy, defeating its defenses and killing Duke Brondy. His daughters, Celerity and Faith, continue resisting,